15. Gospel legends who died of AIDS. They lifted our spirits with powerful voices, but behind the pulpit and praise was a deadly silence. What the church never said out loud is now impossible to ignore. These 15 gospel legends weren't just icons, they were victims of a hidden epidemic that swept through sanctuaries unchecked: AIDS. Why were their struggles covered up? Why did their stories vanish behind stained glass shame at legends of black excellence? We're breaking that silence. Watch until the end to uncover the truth behind the music. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as we bring light to the stories the church never told. Thomas Whitfield. Born in Detroit, Michigan in 1954, Thomas Whitfield emerged as one of gospel music's most gifted composers, arrangers, and pianists. His innovative artistry earned him the title the Maestro, a nickname that reflected his ability to weave classical elements, rich harmonies, and powerful choral structures into a sound that forever changed contemporary gospel. Whitfield's rise to prominence began in the late 1970s and soared through the 1980s. He founded the Thomas Whitfield Company, a group known for its precision and spiritual depth. His arrangements weren't just songs, they were sermons set to music. Tracks like I Shall Wear a Crown, Hold On, Help Is on the Way, and We Need a Word from the Lord became staples in worship spaces nationwide, known for their emotional weight and complex musical architecture. Beyond his own performances, he played a pivotal behind-the-scenes role in the careers of many rising gospel figures. He mentored Vanessa Bell Armstrong, collaborated with Yolanda Adams, and lent his production genius to countless artists, enhancing their sound with his signature sophistication. Yet for all his accomplishments, Whitfield remained a humble servant of the music, preferring to let his compositions speak for themselves. Behind the curtain of praise and performance, however, Whitfield carried a silent burden. In a time when HIV/AIDS was met with fear, ignorance, and condemnation, particularly within the black church, his illness remained hidden from public view. When he died in 1992 at just 38 years old, official reports offered little detail. Only later was it acknowledged that he had succumbed to complications from AIDS. His death sent shockwaves through the gospel community, not only because of the magnitude of his talent, but also because it forced a conversation many had long avoided. At a time when stigma silenced countless voices, Whitfield's passing became a heartbreaking reminder of how deeply the epidemic had infiltrated even the holiest spaces. Despite the pain surrounding his final days, Whitfield's legacy continues to radiate. Choirs still sing his compositions. Musicians still study his arrangements. He helped push gospel beyond the walls of tradition, introducing a level of musical excellence that remains unmatched. Thomas Whitfield's life was a symphony of genius, spirituality, and quiet suffering. Though his time was cut short, his work endures as both art and ministry. He remains not just a musical pioneer, but a symbol of brilliance lost too soon, and a reminder that talent, no matter how extraordinary, is not immune to the silence that surrounded AIDS and gospel music's golden age. Keith Pringle. Keith Pringle's voice wasn't just heard, it commanded a room. Born in Detroit, Michigan, Pringle rose to national prominence in the late 1970s and early 1980s, redefining the choir tradition with boundless energy and unmistakable spiritual conviction. As founder and frontman of the Pentecostal Community Choir, he became a beacon of contemporary gospel, delivering performances that combined soul-stirring vocal techniques with electrifying stage presence. What set Pringle apart was his unique ability to merge traditional black church fervor with emerging gospel trends. Songs like There's a Praise in This House, Jesus, You Brought Me All the Way, and No Greater Love resonated in sanctuaries across America, and his live recordings became essentials in gospel households. With a soaring tenor that could lift a congregation to its feet, he earned both critical acclaim and a deeply devoted following. Beyond his work as a singer, Pringle was a prolific songwriter and mentor to younger artists. His music wasn't simply entertaining, it was a call to worship delivered with authenticity and conviction. Yet behind his public persona, Pringle lived with a struggle he never fully vocalized. During an era when open conversation around HIV/AIDS was rare in religious circles, he battled in silence. Pringle passed away in the early 1990s, though the exact year and cause were not initially made public. In later years, those close to him acknowledged he died due to complications related to AIDS. The secrecy surrounding his illness reflected a broader pattern of fear and shame that permeated church spaces during that time, leaving many such deaths unspoken or misattributed. His loss was felt profoundly within gospel music circles. Many churches continued to sing his songs long after his passing, unknowingly preserving the legacy of a man who had given everything: his talent, his passion, his health, to uplift others. Today, Keith Pringle is remembered not just for his anointed vocals or musical excellence, but for the immense spiritual weight he brought to every note. Though the truth of his death remained hidden for years, his music endures. It tells the story of a man whose calling was undeniable, even as he carried a burden that the world was too afraid to face. Ronald Winans. Ronald "Ron" Winans may not have been the most visible figure in the legendary Winans family, but his voice and heart anchored the group's success in powerful, enduring ways. Born in 1956 in Detroit, he was the fourth of 10 siblings in a household that would come to reshape gospel music in America. Alongside brothers Marvin Carvin and Michael Ron helped form the Winans, a group whose polished harmonies and crossover appeal ushered in a new era of contemporary gospel in the 1980s and 1990s. While Marvin often handled lead vocals and production, Ron's rich baritone provided the depth and warmth that grounded the group's iconic sound. His smooth delivery on tracks like The Question Is and Tomorrow added a soulfulness that endeared him to audiences both religious and secular. Critics and fans alike recognized Ron as the emotional core of the Winans, a steady, understated presence who anchored the group through decades of musical evolution. Outside of recording and touring, Ron was deeply involved in ministry. He worked behind the scenes to mentor younger artists, support his family's various church endeavors, and spread messages of hope through both word and song. But his later years were marked by declining health, the cause of which remained private during his lifetime. In 2005, Ron Winans passed away at just 48 years old, a death initially attributed to heart complications. It was only afterward that gospel insiders confirmed he had succumbed to AIDS-related causes, a revelation that stunned many. Like others in the gospel world, Ron's diagnosis had been shielded by silence, a decision likely influenced by the stigma surrounding HIV/AIDS, especially within devout Christian environments. His passing opened quiet conversations about illness secrecy and judgment in the gospel music community. Even so, his family and peers chose to celebrate his life rather than focus on how it ended. Ron's role in reshaping gospel music, particularly through his contributions to one of its most celebrated families, remains untouched by the circumstances of his death. Ronald Winans may have lived in the shadows of more prominent siblings, but his musical imprint is undeniable. He stood as a symbol of humility, faith, and enduring artistic integrity. His life reminds us that even in silence, one can change the course of a genre and leave behind a legacy that speaks louder than any whisper of shame. Daryl Coley. When Daryl Coley opened his mouth to sing, it wasn't just music, it was ministry wrapped in vocal mastery. Born in Berkeley, California in 1955, Coley's early immersion in both classical music and the Pentecostal church created a uniquely versatile artist. He began his career playing keyboards for gospel great Edwin Hawkins, but it was his remarkable vocal gift that soon pushed him into the spotlight. Nicknamed the Master's Vocalist, Coley possessed an incredible range and interpretative style that blended gospel, jazz, and even classical influences. His 1986 debut album, Just Daryl, earned a Grammy nomination and established him as one of the most dynamic vocalists in sacred music. His later works, such as When the Music Stops and He's Right on Time, demonstrated a spiritual maturity and technical prowess that elevated worship experiences worldwide. Coley's voice was like an instrument-fluid complex and unpredictable in the best way. He didn't just sing melodies, he sculpted soundscapes of faith healing and resilience. Audiences left his concerts feeling they had not only witnessed a performance, but encountered the presence of God. In a community where silence often surrounds health struggles, Coley did the unthinkable. He spoke up. Diagnosed as HIV positive, he became one of the first prominent gospel figures to discuss his condition publicly. His openness was revolutionary. He challenged the church to look past stigma and into the faces of those suffering in silence. Though his official cause of death in 2016 was complications following a diabetic coma and surgery, his battle with HIV/AIDS had long been a part of his private and public journey. He faced his health challenges with honesty and dignity, using his testimony to teach compassion within a community where judgment was often loud. Coley's legacy extends beyond music. He shattered walls of shame, showed that faith and vulnerability could coexist, and offered a blueprint for authenticity in ministry. His songs remain in rotation, and his courage continues to inspire those walking through both spiritual and physical storms. Sherman Hemsley. Best known for portraying the loud-mouthed yet lovable George Jefferson Sherman Hemsley, left an indelible mark on television history. Born in Philadelphia in 1938, Hemsley's career took off with the success of the Jeffersons, but his lesser-known passion for music, specifically gospel, revealed a more introspective side of the man behind the laughter. In the early 2000s, long after the sitcom spotlight had dimmed, Hemsley released Ain't That a Kick in the Head, a gospel-infused album that highlighted his deep appreciation for spiritual music. Though not a formally trained singer, his rich baritone and heartfelt delivery resonated with fans who appreciated authenticity over polish. It was a surprising move for a man best known for comedy, yet it spoke to his roots and spiritual evolution. What many fans didn't know was that Hemsley lived most of his life as a closeted gay man navigating two worlds that were rarely kind to LGBTQ+ individuals, Hollywood and the Black church. While he never publicly addressed his orientation or health during his lifetime, rumors swirled for years. When he passed away in 2012 at age 74, the official cause was lung cancer, but close friends and industry whispers suggested that AIDS-related complications may have played a role in his declining health. Hemsley never claimed the spotlight as an activist yet. By simply existing as a black gay man who remained true to himself, he quietly defied expectations. He didn't lead marches or deliver speeches, but his choices to explore gospel music, to avoid public scandal, to live life on his own terms, left an impact nonetheless. His foray into gospel, though brief, felt deeply personal. It wasn't a commercial move, but a reflection of spiritual longing and possibly reconciliation. The album he left behind is more than a curiosity. It's a glimpse into the complexity of a man whose fame never overshadowed his need for peace. Sherman Hemsley reminds us that legends don't always roar. Sometimes they leave behind soft, soulful echoes that say far more than headlines ever could. Tyrone Davis. Tyrone Davis, born in Greenville, Mississippi in 1938, first rose to fame not in gospel circles, but on the R&B charts. Known for his smooth, velvet voice, he became a Chicago soul staple during the late 1960s and 1970s, churning out romantic hits like Turn Back the Hands of Time, Can I Change My Mind and Give It Up, Turn It Loose. His seductive delivery and heartfelt ballads earned him multiple chart-topping records and a loyal fan base. But as the spotlight faded and health challenges mounted, Davis experienced a spiritual transformation that few expected. In the early 2000s, nearing the end of his life, he returned to the roots of his upbringing, gospel music. His final studio album, The Gospel Soul of Tyrone Davis, 2003, marked a personal and creative pivot. The record blended his R&B stylings with reverent lyrics, reflecting a man grappling with mortality and seeking redemption. While Davis never publicly discussed his health in detail, close associates later revealed that he had been quietly living with AIDS for years. This disclosure added deeper meaning to his late-life spiritual shift. He died in 2005 at age 66, following a stroke. Though his official cause of death wasn't attributed to AIDS, many in his inner circle acknowledged the virus's impact on his overall health. Davis's gospel work may not have reached the heights of his secular career, but it revealed a man searching for peace beyond fame. His transition into sacred music, particularly in his final chapter, was more than a genre change. It was a reconciliation of past, present, and faith. His story is emblematic of many artists who lived between two worlds, the glitz of entertainment and the quiet desperation of private suffering. Tyrone Davis's legacy lies not only in the smooth soul ballads that made him a star, but in the courageous way he turned back to gospel as a final act of grace. Willie Mae Ford Smith. Long before gospel became a commercial force, Willie Mae Ford Smith was laying its foundation. Born in 1904 in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, and raised in St. Louis, she became one of the most influential figures in traditional gospel music. With her thunderous contralto and impassioned sermons in song, Smith helped elevate the role of the gospel soloist, transforming church, singing from choral tradition into individual ministry. In the 1930s, she co-founded the National Convention of Gospel Choirs and Choruses alongside Reverend Thomas Dorsey. Her fiery performances and teaching seminars shaped countless voices, including Mahalia Jackson, who called Smith her greatest mentor. She was a commanding presence not only on the pulpit, but in the lives of generations of Black female gospel singers. Smith was more than a performer. She was a mother figure, spiritual advisor, and educator. Her ministry extended across state lines, shaping the sound and soul of early 20th century gospel. Yet even a woman as rooted in faith as Smith was not spared from witnessing the silent devastation that AIDS would bring decades later. Though Willie Mae herself passed away in 1994 at the age of 89 from natural causes, several of her family members, including grandchildren, succumbed to AIDS-related illnesses in the 1980s and 1990s. These losses were kept private at the time, buried beneath layers of stigma and grief, common in African American religious households during the height of the epidemic. Her story thus expands beyond her own legacy. As matriarch to a family deeply embedded in gospel tradition, Smith carried the heartbreak of watching younger generations silently disappear under the weight of a disease few dared name in church. Her family's experience quietly mirrored what many gospel dynasties faced: unacknowledged funerals, whispered diagnoses, and unresolved sorrow. Still, Smith's contributions remain monumental. She left behind not just recordings and teachings, but a blueprint for gospel as personal testimony. Her resilience, both musical and maternal, continues to inspire. In honoring her, we remember a gospel giant who helped build the genre and bore witness to one of its most painful eras. Andraé Crouch. Andraé Crouch wasn't just a gospel artist. He was a musical architect whose compositions helped define the sound of modern worship. Born in 1942 in San Fernando Valley, California, Crouch's musical gifts emerged early. By his teens, he was forming groups writing songs and forging a path that would merge spiritual depth with unprecedented crossover appeal. In the 1960s, Crouch founded The Disciples, a group that revolutionized gospel by infusing it with soul, jazz, and even pop. His groundbreaking songs, The Blood Will Never Lose Its Power, Soon, and Very Soon, and My Tribute to God Be the Glory, became church standards. His work earned multiple Grammy Awards, Dove Awards, and even an Oscar nomination. Crouch also collaborated with mainstream legends including Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, Madonna, and Quincy Jones, helping bring gospel flavor to pop music without diluting its message. He was the rare artist who could lead a revival and produce for a king of pop in the same breath. But behind his global success, Crouch quietly faced personal health battles. In his later years, he disclosed that he was living with HIV, making him one of the few gospel legends to publicly acknowledge a condition often silenced by stigma. Though he never revealed how he contracted the virus. His honesty broke ground within a church culture that often recoiled from such admissions. Crouch passed away in January 2015 at the age of 72 from a heart attack, but many knew that complications from HIV had weakened his health in prior years. By sharing his diagnosis before his death, he encouraged more compassionate conversations about illness and humanity within faith communities. His legacy is immeasurable. He wrote over 300 songs, mentored countless musicians, and changed the perception of what gospel could be. Andraé Crouch didn't just compose songs, he scored the soundtrack of modern Christian faith, one hymn at a time. Reverend Dr. William H. Gray III. Reverend Dr. William H. Gray III was a man who wore many hats: pastor, politician, professor, and civil rights leader, and he wore each one with conviction. Born in 1941, Gray became a third-generation minister, taking over the pulpit at Bright Hope Baptist Church in Philadelphia, a congregation with a rich legacy of community engagement and spiritual activism. But Gray's influence extended well beyond the pulpit. Elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1978, he became the first African American to chair the House Budget Committee, later serving as House Majority Whip, the third highest position in the chamber. Throughout his career, he championed education reform, economic equity, and international justice, most notably leading the U.S. push for sanctions against apartheid South Africa. Even while serving in Congress, Gray remained dedicated to his church. He preached with urgency, blending policy insights with theological conviction. His ability to straddle politics and the pulpit earned him wide admiration from both faith leaders and lawmakers. Yet behind his towering resume, Gray fought a silent battle. In July 2013, at the age of 71, he died from complications related to AIDS. The news stunned many. For years, his diagnosis had been kept private, a decision rooted in the shame still attached to the disease, especially for religious leaders of his stature. Following his death, his family courageously confirmed the cause, hoping to shatter the silence that often accompanies such losses. They emphasized that Gray should be remembered for his life's work, not its ending. Their candor helped spark overdue conversations about HIV/AIDS within religious and political communities, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths. Gray's life is a testament to moral leadership. He proved that service to God and country could coexist. Even in death, he continued to teach about compassion, truth, and the urgent need to eradicate stigma. His legacy remains woven into the fabric of both the gospel world and American history. Billy Preston. Billy Preston's life was a whirlwind of genius, fame, and hidden pain. Born in Houston, Texas in 1946 and raised in Los Angeles, he was heralded as a child prodigy, a gifted keyboardist playing with Mahalia Jackson at age 10 and performing with Nat King Cole by 12. By his teens, he was recording his own albums and touring internationally. Though steeped in gospel from a young age, Preston's musical path soon expanded far beyond the church. His virtuosic Hammond B3 organ work caught the attention of the Beatles, with whom he played on hits like Get Back and Something. Dubbed the Fifth Beatle, he also collaborated with the Rolling Stones, Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, and Eric Clapton. Despite his deep roots in gospel, Preston became one of the most influential sidemen in rock and soul history. Amid his secular success, Preston never severed ties with his spiritual foundation. He released multiple gospel albums throughout his career, including Ministry of Music and Universal Love, showcasing his lifelong reverence for sacred sounds. His gospel work fused church passion with technical brilliance, offering praise from a place of authenticity. However, Preston's life behind the scenes was complicated. He struggled with addiction, legal issues, and personal demons. In the 1990s and early 2000s, his health declined rapidly. He battled kidney failure and was eventually hospitalized long-term. When he died in 2006 at age 59, his death certificate revealed pericarditis caused by AIDS-related complications, a fact unknown to the public until that moment. The revelation shocked fans, yet it mirrored a pattern seen with many black artists of his generation: silence surrounding illness due to shame and fear. Despite living in the limelight, Preston had kept his diagnosis hidden, a reminder of how even icons were not immune to the weight of stigma. Billy Preston's legacy lives on not only in his legendary recordings, but in the way he bridged genres, worlds, and emotions. He was a musical chameleon who brought gospel to the rock stage and reverence to the nightclub. His story is a bittersweet reminder that brilliance can both dazzle and suffer quietly. Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy Pendergrass was more than a singer, he was a force of nature. Born in Philadelphia in 1950, his journey began as a drummer for Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, but it wasn't long before his commanding baritone took center stage. With hits like If You Don't Know Me By Now and Wake Up Everybody, Pendergrass became a symbol of masculine soul, powerful, passionate, and undeniably charismatic. His solo career in the late 1970s skyrocketed. Songs like Close the Door, Love TKO, and Turn Off the Lights solidified his status as a platinum-selling heartthrob, especially known for his ladies-only concerts that drew swooning fans by the thousands. At his peak, Pendergrass embodied black male sensuality in a way few had before. Then came the life-altering accident. In 1982, a car crash left him paralyzed from the chest down. Many assumed his career was over. Instead, Teddy reinvented himself, leaning on faith, resilience, and a rediscovered connection to gospel music. In 1998, he released Truly Blessed, an album that reflected a more spiritual and introspective man, still strong, but shaped by suffering. What the public didn't know, however, was that years earlier, Pendergrass had contracted HIV through a blood transfusion. His family later confirmed that AIDS-related complications played a role in his death in 2010 at age 59, though the topic remained largely undiscussed during his life. Even after surviving paralysis, he faced another invisible battle, one made even heavier by the stigma still clinging to HIV/AIDS, particularly among men in the Black and gospel communities. Though known primarily for his R&B catalog, Pendergrass's later work in gospel and advocacy gave voice to a broader, deeper message, one of survival acceptance and spiritual rebirth. He became active in disability awareness and often spoke publicly about overcoming personal trials. Teddy Pendergrass's story is one of transformation. From the seductive singer who lit up arenas to a man who praised God from a wheelchair to a fighter who faced AIDS with quiet dignity, his life was a testament to strength in all its forms. And while his voice has been stilled, its echoes continue to remind us that true greatness often comes not just from what we sing, but from how we rise. Walter Hawkins. Bishop Walter Hawkins was not just a gospel artist, he was a minister, innovator, and spiritual visionary whose music brought hope to millions. Born in Oakland, California in 1949, Hawkins emerged during a powerful wave of West Coast gospel rooted in community activism and artistic excellence. He first gained attention as part of the Edwin Hawkins Singers singing on the groundbreaking crossover hit, Oh Happy Day. But Walter's individual legacy was just beginning. He would go on to form the Love Center Choir and release a series of albums titled Love Alive starting in 1975 that transformed gospel music. With songs like Changed, Thank You Lord, and Going Up Yonder, Hawkins wove sermons into melody melding traditional church sounds with smooth R&B production and urban flair. These recordings were more than music. They were declarations of faith, resilience, and joy. Walter wasn't only a musical force. He was also the founding pastor of Love Center Church, a progressive congregation in Oakland known for its open-door approach during a time when many churches remained rigid and exclusive. Hawkins created a spiritual home for those on the margins, artists, outcasts, and believers seeking authenticity over dogma. Although Walter Hawkins died in 2010 at age 61 from pancreatic cancer, his story intersects deeply with the AIDS crisis. His brother Edwin Hawkins later revealed that many close to their ministry choir members, musicians, and longtime friends had died from AIDS-related complications during the height of the epidemic in the 1980s and 1990s. Walter's ministry offered sanctuary and compassion when others turned away in fear. Through his music and leadership, Hawkins addressed the silence with grace. He never politicized the epidemic, but he responded to it the way a true pastor would, by comforting the afflicted, honoring their lives, and refusing to let stigma cloud their humanity. Walter Hawkins left behind a legacy that transcends charts and awards. His Love Alive series sold over 1 million copies, but more importantly, his message of unconditional grace still resonates in sanctuaries worldwide. He showed that worship could be both modern and sacred, and that a church could sing and serve with equal power. Twinkie Clark. Elbernita Twinkie. Clark isn't just known as a gospel pioneer, she's often called the mother of contemporary gospel music. Born in 1954, she is the creative genius behind the iconic Clark Sisters, a family group that revolutionized the sound of gospel with daring harmonies, fierce energy, and lyrical boldness. But while her compositions soared, Twinkie's witness to quiet devastation has shaped her legacy in a profound way. As the principal songwriter, arranger, and keyboardist for the Clark Sisters, Twinkie penned classics like You Brought the Sunshine, Is My Living in Vain, and Expect a Miracle. Her innovative fusion of Pentecostal roots, jazz chord progressions, and funk grooves birthed a sound that was as groundbreaking as it was divine. She brought the Hammond B3 organ to life in a way that turned Sunday mornings into holy concerts. But Twinkie's story extends beyond stage and studio. During the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s and 1990s, she witnessed firsthand the staggering toll the disease took on gospel choirs, musicians, and community members. In later interviews, she bravely spoke out about losing numerous choir members to AIDS voices that once echoed beside hers in ministry, but disappeared quietly due to shame, stigma, and the silence imposed by religious spaces. At a time when many church leaders denied or avoided the topic, Twinkie chose to speak. Her transparency helped shift the conversation in gospel circles, shedding light on how the epidemic had decimated a generation of singers and instrumentalists, many of whom had no voice once the diagnosis came. She did not weaponize their deaths. She remembered them. Though Twinkie Clark is still alive, her inclusion in this story reflects her critical role as a survivor and truth-teller. She continues to minister, perform, and educate younger artists, often recounting not only the triumphs of gospel, but the losses that shaped its journey. Her willingness to name the grief, to remember the unnamed, and to use her platform to advocate for openness makes her testimony as powerful as her music. Twinkie Clark stands as a living archive of gospel's most triumphant and tragic era, a voice that refused to let silence have the final word. Reverend James Cleveland. Few figures have shaped gospel music as profoundly as Reverend James Cleveland. Born in 1931 in Chicago, he redefined the sound of sacred music across the 20th century. Known for his raspy, preacher-like vocals and complex arrangements, Cleveland elevated gospel from small choirs to massive productions, fusing classical jazz and traditional black church influences. His landmark recordings, Peace Be Still, Lord Help Me to Hold Out, and God Has Smiled on Me, remain foundational pieces in church repertoires worldwide. Beyond his vocal performances, Cleveland was a mentor, teacher, and organizer. He founded the Gospel Music Workshop of America, GMWA, in 1967, a monumental institution that nurtured thousands of gospel artists and musicians, creating an enduring infrastructure for the genre. But behind the accolades and choirs was a man shrouded in privacy. Cleveland's health declined sharply in the late 1980s, and he passed away in 1991 at the age of 59. Officially, the cause of death was heart failure, but unconfirmed rumors never substantiated by family or medical records suggested that AIDS-related complications may have contributed to his death. The speculation speaks less to confirmed fact and more to the climate of the time. The early 90s were still steeped in stigma, shame, and silence, especially within black religious communities. For someone of Cleveland's stature, an unmarried man who lived privately, questions surrounding his health and sexuality lingered uncomfortably after his passing. Yet none of these ambiguities diminish his cultural and spiritual legacy. Cleveland democratized gospel, bringing it into concert halls, crossover charts, and televised specials. He served as a bridge between old-school traditionalism and the new wave of contemporary expression, inspiring artists from Aretha Franklin to Kirk Franklin. Though his final days remain the subject of whispered speculation, the indelible truth is this: James Cleveland gave gospel music a home, a platform, and a future. Whatever battles he faced privately, he did not let them define his ministry. His voice, his arrangements, and his institutions live on, etched into every Sunday morning choir stand where the Spirit still moves. Dr. Donald V. Curlin. Dr. Donald V. Curlin wasn't a household name like many others on this list, but his story is among the most powerful and heartbreaking. A dedicated pastor-minister and first husband of well-known evangelist Pastor Tamara Bennett Curlin's life and death became a deeply personal lens into how AIDS impacted even the most devout families in the church. Curlin and Bennett married in the 1990s, building a ministry together rooted in holiness, healing, and deliverance. Their union appeared rock solid, a symbol of God-centered love and spiritual purpose. But in 1999, Curlin began to suffer mysterious health issues. A trip to the emergency room would alter everything. Doctors diagnosed him with AIDS, a revelation that shocked both his wife and their church community. According to Bennett, Curlin confided that he had contracted HIV before their marriage and had chosen not to reveal it. Out of love and loyalty, she chose to honor his wish for confidentiality and cared for him through the final stages of his illness. His decline was steep, marked by dementia, seizures, and other debilitating complications. He passed away in June 2000 at just 40 years old. Years later, Bennett would break the silence. In her documentary, Journeys of Faith, she shared their story in raw detail, not to scandalize, but to minister. Her goal was to educate the church and destigmatize a disease still cloaked in silence, especially in faith communities. She made it clear that Curlin had not been unfaithful, but had feared the judgment he knew would follow a disclosure of his condition. Curlin's life was tragically short, but through Bennett's testimony, it became a vehicle for truth and healing. His story underscores the urgent need for compassion, transparency, and education around HIV/AIDS, not only to save lives, but to dismantle the shame that destroys them in silence. Though not a public gospel artist, Dr. Donald Curlin's story belongs here as a reminder that behind many gospel anthems are untold stories of pain, secrets, and grace. His life and the love that surrounded him in his final days have become a beacon for others navigating the same dark path. What does it say about the gospel world when so many of its brightest lights were lost in silence, their truths buried beneath stigma? As we remember these 15 legends, we're left to wonder how many voices were never heard, how many stories never told. At Legends of Black Excellence, we believe their legacies deserve honesty, not erasure. Do you think the church has done enough to confront the AIDS crisis within its own walls? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as we continue honoring truth, talent, and untold history.